I've been having lots of fun, so I guess time has flown by. But it's been 1 year this month, since I got the phone call that my Nikon Z9 had arrived at the store where I ordered it. My local friendly carousel cameras in Victoria, BC, little plug for them. I ordered it a day or so after Nikon's announcement in November 2021, I guess it was. So really that wasn't too bad, shy of 4 months to get my hands on one. I realized that wasn't the experience of many people who were waiting as well. And I will admit there were days when I got a bit impatient. Given its features and good reviews, well, it really became apparent pretty quickly that there was a run on sales, even at $5,500 US. Here in Canada, by the time I'd paid provincial and federal taxes, my savings were down $7,000. Well, not really, because I traded in a whole bunch of stuff, including another mirrorless system, to rationalize the purchase. Anyway, let's not forget that at release, $5,500 US was and is a very competitive price compared to its rivals. But let's get to my impressions. Hi, Ray here. Please excuse the nasally narration. Put it down to the blossoms. I won't go deep into all the technical details here. So if that's what you're looking for, sorry. There have been a ton of those reviews over the 15 or so months this camera has been out in the wild. And it has been some wild places in the hands of people like Morton Hilmer. While my adventures with the Z9 have been somewhat more tame, I do think that I have given it a run for the money. Whether that's shooting wildlife, sports, landscape, or time-lapse video, more on the latter later, this camera's handled everything that I've thrown at it. And I know will leave plenty of room for me to grow in my photographic journey that has, so far, spanned more than 5 decades. Before I continue, let's look at a few details, at least superficially, as they relate to my use. First, it's a pretty big camera by mirrorless standards, though not quite as big as its DSLR predecessors. The vertical grip cum battery compartment does add bulk and obviously weight when it's loaded. It takes the EN-EL18 series batteries, and the new EN-EL18D battery can handle up to 170 minutes of video recording. I'd said in my earliest comments at the rumor stage of development that I could do without the vertical grip. Have that as an accessory. That decision is history, and maybe the rumored Z8 will give us that. How they handle the power demands in that case will be interesting, but as a flagship, it makes sense to have the vertical grip here. And its inclusion, of course, helps produce a weather-sealed unit. And this is a solid pro body all around. Super strong magnesium alloy shell with outstanding heat dissipation, hence nearly unlimited 8K video recording, and cold tolerance down to -10 Celsius, 14 Fahrenheit. The ergonomics as a whole, well, ergonomics are a personal thing, but for me, they're what I've come to expect from Nikon cameras. They're just the best. The button layout is great, and the fact that many are illuminated is a real help, whether night shooting or in a dark studio. So, despite the weight of this camera, 1,340 grams or 2.9 pounds with battery and recording media, it is a beautifully balanced unit that I can carry for some time without undue fatigue. However, and this is due to my arthritis handicap, I do resort to a monopod, at least sooner than with my Z6s. Let me be clear about my use case from the get-go. I'm not primarily a wildlife or action sport photographer, so it's conceivable that I might not put the same demands on the Z9's autofocus acquisition and tracking. Having said that, I do dabble in both of those areas. In bygone days, cycle racing and a few other sports were my specialties, so I still, as I say, dabble. And goodness me, this camera is a marvel when it comes to autofocus for fast action of any kind. The available tracking subjects, people, animals, cars, motorcycles, bicycles. I actually made this request early in the development stage, and I'm going to stick to my story that I'm the one responsible for the inclusion of bikes as a vehicle in that this camera can recognize and track. Seriously though, the eye detection and AF generally I found to be wonderful right from day one. The focus modes are, to me, entirely intuitive. The heart of the Z9, the Expeed 7 processor, is 10 times faster than previous cameras. Shutter speed up to 1/32,000th of a second. Burst mode gives up to 20 frames per second RAW. I personally don't need more. I usually restrict that anyway. I hate sorting through thousands of photos. But if you do need that decisive moment, there's up to 120 frames per second if you're okay with 11 megapixel JPEGs. The big Firmware 2 update added pre-release burst. Once you've set that up at 30 or 120 frames per second, the camera starts recording with a half press of the shutter, though there's no shutter, or when you press the AF on button if you're set for back button focus. Depending on the time you've set for the pre-release, you'll get that time, say 1 second's worth of images, recorded before you actually hit the release button. Let's talk for a moment about RAW options for stills. I said I wasn't going down the technical rabbit hole, but I do think that this is a feature of the Z9 worth examining a bit closer. The Z9 has 3 RAW recording modes. First, there's lossless compressed, as in the video options. Nikon has introduced Tico RAW from Intopix, which includes high efficiency star and high efficiency. I can't find any image quality difference between lossless and high efficiency star files, and only a very slight loss of dynamic range with standard high efficiency files. But look at the size of your average NEF RAW file. Lossless compression produces a file size of approximately 55 megabytes with a buffer capacity of 79 frames. High efficiency star, about 33 megabytes, buffer capacity 685 frames. High efficiency approximately 22 megabytes, buffer capacity over 1000 frames. It took a while for some post-processing tools to integrate high efficiency RAW, but I think most image processing software is caught up, with DxO, actually the latest to get on board. Photolab 6.4 now supports the files. Anyway, I have no issues with Lightroom and the plugins that I use. I've used high efficiency star from the get-go with Lightroom, no issues whatsoever. The camera includes all the usual size variations of JPEG, basic, normal, and fine. Built-in 2.4 and 5 GHz Wi-Fi to transfer images fast. I must mention those firmware updates because they've been the best that I've seen from any manufacturer to date, including Fuji, who I think it's fair to say pioneered the trend of Kaizen updates. 2.0 was the first major Z9 update. Mine shipped with 1.10. 2.0 was the first biggie, and besides a ton of features like pre-burst, adding wide area AFC1 and wide area AFC2 autofocus area modes, controls and fixes for photo and video, we got the promised NRAW 12-bit NEV and ProRes RAW HQ 12-bit RAW video recording. This update was, as I said at the time, it was like getting a whole new version of the Z9. Then 3.0 was another amazing jump. We got high-res zoom improvements to low contrast focus. I have, I think, covered most, if not all, the firmware updates. If you want more info, I'll link those in the description. So I'm not the first to praise the Z9 as a great sport and wildlife camera. Now, I haven't tested it side by side with cameras in the same league, but I have read reviews by people who do own, in addition to the Z9, say the Sony A1 and Canon R3, and their conclusions seem to be that all these cameras have their pluses and minuses when compared in various circumstances and by individual features, but that the Z9 stands head-to-head with any of the flagships available today, and depending on an individual photographer's needs, it eclipses others in some areas, not the least in video capabilities. I do want to mention the electronic viewfinder. The Z9 features a 1.27 centimeter, 0.5 inch, approximately 3690K dot quad VGA OLED EVF. That's a mouthful. With a peak brightness of 3000 nits, 0.8 times magnification. It's blackout free without frame substitution due to its dual channel processing, meaning that there are two image data channels from the stacked 45.7 megapixel CMOS sensor, one for the EVF and one for still image capture. The dual Expeed chips process both images simultaneously, so there's never a need to prioritize one stream over the other. It has a resolution of 3.69 million dots, which is less than some of its competitors. But the Z9 provides an absolutely beautiful EVF experience due to its superior brightness and low latency. That's the lag between what occurs in front of the camera and the presentation of the scene in the viewfinder. So no blackout. The Z9's super fast readout, which enabled Nikon to dump the mechanical shutter altogether, is the revolution at work here. So to sum up, lowest latency, highest brightness, no stutter or lag, blackout free without frame substitution. So that makes this, I would argue, the best EVF out there, despite its lesser resolution by the numbers. Real-time EVF. And I should mention, the lightning quick readout speed has also pretty much eliminated rolling shutter distortion, a problem really that's dogged mirrorless cameras before now. Dual card slots, and they will take XQD or CF Express Type B. You have to budget for large capacity fast CF Express if you want to take advantage of the camera's capabilities in burst photography and 8K video. I like the Delkin black cards. I've had good luck with Angelbird as well. The 3.2-inch tilting screen gives me everything I need. And 2100K dot resolution. It has a clear image in even low light. And I love the fact that we can tilt in vertical. And it seems to me that it's pretty robust. Would it be better if it was full flippy? Sure, I guess so. Maybe the rumored Z8 will bring that. The battery life is excellent. I own one spare that has got me through the longest photo shoots that I've had to date. But we also have USB power delivery. I've shown how I power my video rig from a V-mount battery. The sensor shield is welcomed, though it's not an absolute barrier against dust. Going on Nikon's telephoto lens releases in 2022, the wildlife sport cohort has really been served well, I think, and it looks like 2023 is going to see some really special lenses as well. Know what I mean? We now have, or will soon have, 32 FX Nikkor lenses, 28 announced, 4 on the roadmap. Nikon's decision to license the Z mount, I think, is a smart move as well. We just saw Sigma release 3 DX lenses. So I think after 4 years, the lack of lenses complaint that always ignored the FTZ and other adapters in general, surely that's been put to bed. The Z mount lenses are fantastic. From the original 1.8s through to the 1.2 bokeh beasts, the Z mount was always about opening up, so to speak, lens design advances. As my friend Matt Irwin referred to it in a recent chat, the Z9 is a real Swiss Army knife of a camera, right from the announcement and during development. I think Nikon executives telegraphed that they were serious about video specs, and it was clear it would be built around 8K video. Also raw recording and some serious in-camera video specs. I won't repeat here what I said in my early speculative videos on the prospect of 8K video. Other than shooting in 8K allows lots of room for creative editing on a 4K timeline. It's awesome. So we did get internal RAW. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And we got 10-bit internal. As I said, Firmware 3.0 brought 12-bit NRAW, Apple ProRes RAW HQ, and Nikon's, or should we say, Intopix's NEV, which, and this is still the case at this time, could only be edited with DaVinci Resolve, which was, and is, kind of disappointing to me, because I do not have the time to learn another NLE. I use Final Cut Pro, and that's not at all likely to change. I've invested 4 years or more to develop, admittedly basic skills with Final Cut. And keeping up with producing these videos and all my other work leaves not a minute of spare time to master even the rudiments of another NLE. Hell, the intricacies of the Z9 have been taking up all that time. But even the 10-bit SDR out of this camera is superb, using the flat profile, just like I do with 8-bit Z6 video. It produces top-notch files that are fine for everything short of really high contrast scenes. And then, for me, 10-bit N-Log, which I'm used to, that really does the trick. Before I forget, there's another video spec that I make use of all the time, the built-in 8K time-lapse function. This is a Nikon camera feature, generally, that I've been using since it was included. What was that, a decade ago? Anyway, it was great when we got 4K in the first Z cameras, and now it's even better. In the same way, 8K is generally opening up options for editing in 4K. There are challenges that come with the Z9 or any flagship camera like this. Maybe it's my aging cerebral cortex, but I don't think I'm alone. Monitoring social media, it's obvious the Z9 has been frustrating for some people. Perhaps those who hadn't had experience with a flagship or advanced DSLR. So what Nikon has given us with the Z9 is a tool that, well, as Matt said, it's a multi-tool, a modern electronic marvel, really. And it is complex, especially if you're coming from a different system, I'd think. But I'd agree, as far as things like Nikon's menu system, you couldn't do better. I know I might be wading into choppy waters here, perhaps, because I've heard other reviewers praise menu systems from other brands that, to me, seem absolutely labyrinthian. I admit, these are personal preferences, right? And I have been with Nikon menu systems, not exclusively, because I have had other brands and tried all the most popular ones. But I've been around the Nikon menu system since menu systems really were developed. And I'm not going to claim that I never have one of those moments when you say, where the hell is that option? Yeah, it happens, right? But for the most part, I can usually find what I'm looking for. And the customization options are, for the most part, well designed. Having said that, I'm not the kind of photographer that customizes the hell out of a camera. Just a few often used things. And these days, I'm not under the kind of pressure that I can't take a second to change settings in the field. And for that reason, I don't make much use of all the custom banks and whatnot. I know I probably should. And maybe one of these days, I'll rewatch Hudson Henry's tutorials on the subject. But for this first year, I've made very little use of those. Really, for my use case, I have the leisure of just setting everything up as I go. Old dog syndrome, perhaps. But here's a thought. Complexity can get in the way of spontaneity and creativity. So I say, don't overthink. The camera should ultimately disappear into the creative process. And if really, okay, setting up custom settings helps in that regard, I think the Z9 fits the bill. It is a very powerful and versatile tool. I think Nikon listened and they answered the needs and wants of the widest possible audience with this camera. Those who say otherwise, really, they haven't been paying attention. Sports, wildlife, landscape, portraiture, fashion. This is a camera that can and has been proven in the hands of experts in all those genres. Now, any beefs? Nothing really that interferes with my overall satisfaction. I've mentioned the lack of support for NRAW outside of DaVinci Resolve, but that's not up to Nikon. I have noticed one strange phenomenon. Some of my Z lenses seem ever so slightly noisier on the Z9 than the Z6s. I don't know why that would be, perhaps because the Z9 focusing is more sensitive. Something to do with the VR, which is generally improved. It doesn't affect me because I record audio externally. I've only noticed it when I was syncing audio, using that recorded in camera with the camera's mic. That's the only thing I use the camera's mic for. Which reminds me, the Z9 does have improved audio, 24-bit. I do wish the earphone and mic ports had been given separate covers to the big Ethernet port. The same might be said for the USB-C and HDMI ports. I don't necessarily want the HDMI port exposed when I'm just using USB, and vice versa. I can understand it's easier to pair these up, but it would have been nice if the designers could have separated them. If I'm not mistaken, this was the case with the D5 and D6. On the front, there's the flash sync, and I really like that we have the 10-pin remote terminal. So, for instance, I can use the MC20 timer that I've had for over 2 decades, that I use with cameras like the F90X film camera. I'd love to hear from fellow Z9 owners. Let me know in the comments how your Z9 journey is going. So, I hope that I've shown, as in other related videos like the Z400 f4.5 lens review, it's helping me create better images. Not to mention images that I might not have even been able to create before. It's proving to be everything that I expected when it was first announced, in fact. And it hasn't disappointed in any of the areas that I work. In fact, I hope I've shown my enthusiasm in this video when it comes to absolute image quality, camera function, ergonomics, and build quality. This is absolutely the best digital camera that I've ever owned. Check out the 400 4.5 video for more results from the Z9. And if you found this video interesting, please do give it the old thumbs up. And if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. We'd love to see you again. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Until then, take care, cheers, and we'll see you later.